Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are opening up a file that is, it's quite literally all over the map.
That's a good way to put it.
I mean, if you look at a map of North America, you just cannot escape this name.
No, you really can't.
You have a massive river in New York, a gigantic bay in Canada it's basically an inland sea.
A strait, too. The Hudson Strait.
A strait, a county, bridges, parkways. The name, of course, is Henry Hudson.
It is a name that is just completely ubiquitous in North American geography. It's impossible to navigate the northeast of the continent without saying his name.
Exactly. And yet, when I started looking into the stack of notes and research we have for today, I realized something kind of unsettling.
What's that?
We know the name, we know the places, but the man himself, he is a ghost. He's a phantom.
That is the central paradox of Henry Hudson, isn't it? He's arguably one of the most famous explorers in history, certainly regarding the European colonization of North America, but his life is largely a blank page. We really only have concrete records for the last 4 years of his life.
Just 4 years.
From 1607 to 1611. Before that, it's mostly shadows, speculation, and, some educated guesses.
That is wild to think about. Imagine being so famous that 400 years later, millions of people say your name every single day.
Right. Commuting to work.
Commuting to work, crossing the George Washington Bridge over the Hudson River, but nobody knows when you were born or really what you did for the first 40 years of your existence.
And the tragedy is that while the beginning is a mystery, we know exactly how it ends.
And it does not end well.
No. It ends in one of the most famous and brutal stories of mutiny and abandonment in all of history.
It really does. And that is the mission for this deep dive. We're going to try to reconstruct the life of this obsession-driven explorer. We want to understand the geopolitical forces, the massive corporate wars, really, that sent him into the ice.
Yeah, the why behind the voyages.
And ultimately, we need to analyze the dark psychological unraveling that led to that infamous mutiny.
It's a story of ambition, bad leadership, and the freezing cold. But it's also, I think, a story about the transition from the old world to the modern commercial world.
So engage with us here. Imagine you're a celebrity, your name is on everything, but your face and your ultimate fate are a complete mystery. Let's unpack the life of Henry Hudson. Where do we even start?
We have to start by setting the scene. To understand Hudson, you have to understand the world of the early 17th century.
The Age of Discovery.
The Age of Discovery, yes, but we need to strip away some of the romanticism. We tend to think of explorers as these swashbuckling adventurers doing it for the glory of the crown or
the thrill of the unknown.
The thrill of the unknown, exactly. That's the movie version. The reality was much more cynical. This wasn't just about adventure. It was about money.
Right. It's always about the money.
Specifically the spice trade. At this time, the Spanish and the Portuguese controlled everything.
The southern routes.
The southern routes to the Spice Islands, to India and China. They had a complete stranglehold on the flow of silk, spices, gold. And they defended those routes with massive armadas.
So if you were England or the Netherlands, you couldn't just sail south.
You couldn't go south without getting blown out of the water by the Spanish Navy. You were desperate for a shortcut.
So you have to go north. It's a geometry problem, essentially.
Precisely. The holy grail of navigation at this time was the Northern Passage.
The Northwest Passage.
Either the Northwest Passage, sailing over the top of North America, or the Northeast Passage, sailing over the top of Russia. The belief was that if you could just get through the ice, you would find a direct warm water route to Cathay to China.
And this wasn't just about national pride. This was corporate warfare, right? Because we aren't talking about Navy ships here.
No, and this is a crucial distinction. The entities funding these trips were the Muscovy Company in England and the Dutch East India Company, the VOC.
These were the first massive multinational corporations.
They really were. They were the Amazon and Google of their day. They invented the concept of the joint stock company.
Let's pause on that for a second. Explain the joint stock concept, because I think that changes how we view Hudson.
Yeah.
He wasn't a naval officer. He was an employee.
He was a contractor. Before this era, if you wanted to send a ship to India, you had to be incredibly rich, a nobleman or a king. If the ship sank, you lost everything.
You were ruined.
You were ruined. The joint stock company allowed hundreds of merchants, middle-class guys, to pool their money. They bought shares. If the ship sank, you lost your investment, but you didn't go bankrupt. But if it came back...
You were rich.
You were fabulously rich. A single successful voyage could return 400% or 500% profit to the shareholders. So these companies were hungry. They were looking for shareholder value.
And Hudson wasn't just an explorer.
He was a corporate contractor hired to find a new trade route and deliver a return on investment.
Okay, so we have the setting. High-stakes corporate backers, desperate need for a shortcut to bypass the Spanish. Enter Henry Hudson. You mentioned we don't know much about his early life. Do we know anything?
We have scraps, just, little bits and pieces. We estimate he was born somewhere between 1565 and 1570.
So he's in his 40s when the story really starts.
Exactly. He's likely from England, possibly a place called Hudson in Hertfordshire, or maybe just London.
And he had a family.
Yes. We know he was married to a woman named Catherine. They had 3 known sons, Oliver, Richard, and John. And you need to remember the name John Hudson.
Why is John so important?
Because John isn't just a footnote in a genealogy chart. John accompanies his father on all of his major voyages.
All of them, as a kid.
He's a teenager, essentially growing up on these wooden ships in the Arctic, and tragically, he shares his father's fate.
Wow. That adds a whole different layer to the story. It's not just a captain and his crew. It's a father and son.
It is.
Now, I read in the notes about a theory regarding how Hudson got his start. Because you don't just walk in off the street and get given command of a ship, right?
Yeah.
Especially not in your 40s.
No, especially not in the 17th century. It was a closed shop. The prevailing theory, and it's a strong one, is that Hudson was a beneficiary of nepotism, or at least a powerful family legacy.
Okay.
There was another man named Henry Hudson, likely his grandfather, who was a founding member of the Muscovy Company back in 1555.
The same company that hires our Henry Hudson later.
The very same. The grandfather was an alderman in London, a very wealthy merchant. The theory is that our Henry Hudson essentially grew up in the company.
So he was an insider.
He probably started as a cabin boy, maybe worked in the London offices and learned the trade from the inside out. He was a company man.
That makes sense. It explains why, when he pops up in the records in 1607, he's already a captain. He's not working his way up from the bottom. He's part of the establishment.
Exactly. He was literate, skilled in mathematics, and an expert navigator. You don't pick those skills up by accident. He was groomed for this. And his grandfather's connections likely opened the door for his first command.
Okay, so let's get into the action. It's 1607. Hudson is in his 40s, which is actually considered somewhat middle-aged for a first major command in those days, isn't it?
It is. He's not a young hotshot. He's a seasoned mariner getting his big break. The Muscovy Company hires him for a very specific and frankly audacious mission.
What was the plan?
Voyage 1, 1607. Ship, the Hopewell. The plan was to sail directly across the North Pole to reach China.
Wait, directly across the North Pole, like right over the top.
Right over the top.
But pause on that for a second. You're telling me that a room full of wealthy, educated London merchants looked at a map of the North Pole, the coldest place on Earth, and decided the best way to China was to sail straight through it.
It sounds insane to us, but you have to get into the 17th century mindset. They were relying on a scientific theory. Yeah, it was called the open polar sea. The logic was actually based on the sun. They knew that in the Arctic summer, the sun doesn't set for months.
Right, the midnight sun.
Exactly. So the leading scientists, men like Robert Thorne, argued that constant sunshine would generate a cumulative heat effect. They believed the ice was only a ring around the edges near land.
Okay.
But once you punch through that outer ring, the 24-hour sun would have melted the center of the polar cap into a warm, calm, tropical ocean.
So they weren't expecting a frozen wasteland. They were expecting a tropical shortcut.
They were expecting blue water and smooth sailing. Hudson wasn't sailing into the ice because he was reckless. He was sailing into it because the best science of his day promised him it would disappear.
That is fascinating and terrifying. The disconnect between their theory and reality is lethal.
It was dead wrong.
Yeah.
But Hudson was a believer. He set sail with 10 men, including his son, John.
Only 10 men.
It's a tiny ship. They make it to the Shetland Islands, then Greenland, and then they hit Spitsbergen, which is in the Svalbard archipelago.
And I assume they hit ice.
Massive ice. Impenetrable walls of it. They tried to navigate around it, zigzagging back and forth. You have to imagine the sound, the grinding, the cracking.
On a wooden ship.
These are wooden ships, not steel icebreakers. A single wrong move, and the hull is crushed. He made it further north than anyone had recorded before, about 80 degrees latitude, but he didn't find the passage.
So, a failure? From a corporate perspective?
Commercially. In terms of the original goal, yes, a total failure. But here's the corporate entrepreneur side of Hudson. He didn't find China, but he found something else.
What?
Massive pods of whales.
Whales.
The waters around Spitsbergen were teeming with them. Hudson reported this back to the Muscovy Company, and while they didn't get their spice route, this discovery basically kick-started the English whaling industry in the Arctic.
Wow.
It became incredibly lucrative. Whale oil was the petroleum of the 17th century. It lit the lamps of London.
So he failed, but he made the money in the long run.
Exactly. But there was a red flag on this voyage that we shouldn't ignore. Hudson demoted his first mate, a guy named William Collins, during the trip.
Just demoted him mid-voyage.
Replaced him with a guy named John Coleman. It seems like a small detail, but it establishes a pattern. Hudson was quick to dissatisfaction with his officers. He had trouble managing the egos and the discipline of his crew.
It's some serious foreshadowing.
It's the first crack in the hull, metaphorically speaking.
Right. So he comes back, no China, but lots of whales. The Muscovy Company says, okay, Henry, nice try. Let's try again.
Voyage 2, 1608. Same sponsor, same ship, the Hopewell. But this time, they change tactics.
What do?
Instead of going over the pole, they tell him to go northeast, sail over the top of Russia.
The Northeast Passage.
Correct. He heads for Novaya Zemlya, these islands in the Arctic Ocean north of Russia.
And let me guess. Ice.
Ice. Endless ice. He tries to push through, but nature just isn't cooperating. But there is one very strange, specific detail from the logbooks of this voyage that I love.
Oh.
It tells you so much about the mindset of these sailors.
Is this the mermaid story?
It is the mermaid story.
Okay, tell us about the mermaid, because this sounds like something from a fairy tale, not a ship's log.
So Hudson writes in his log that two of his crewmen, Thomas Hillis and Robert Rayner, saw a mermaid. And he records it very matter-of-factly.
Just like Tuesday saw a mermaid.
Pretty much. He says she came close to the ship's side, looking at the men. He describes her back and breasts as being like a woman's, her skin very white, and long black hair hanging down her back.
Specific.
Very specific. And then he says when she dove down, they saw her tail, which was like the tail of a porpoise and speckled like a mackerel.
Wow. I mean, we assume they saw a seal or a walrus and had been at sea too long, right?
Almost certainly. A beluga whale, maybe? But the fact that Hudson, a man of science and navigator, recorded it without skepticism shows that in the early 17th century, the ocean was still a place of monsters and magic.
The line between reality and myth was very thin.
Very thin. These men were sailing off the edge of the map. If the map said, here be monsters, they expected to see monsters.
It speaks to the psychological stress, too. If you're staring at white ice and gray water for months, your brain starts to fill in the gaps.
Absolutely. It's a form of collective hallucination born of isolation and expectation.
So, 2 failed voyages for the English. The Muscovy Company must be losing patience.
They were done. They cut him loose. After 1608, the English investors decided Hudson was a bad bet. He hadn't delivered the passage.
But Hudson isn't done. He's obsessed.
He is obsessed, and this leads to his most controversial move. If England won't hire him, he crosses the channel. He goes to the rival.
He goes to the Dutch.
He goes to the Dutch.
Wait, let's look at the legal and ethical situation here. Hudson is an Englishman. His grandfather founded the Muscovy Company.
Yeah.
And now he's walking into the headquarters of the VOC, the Dutch East India Company, in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Basically, he's walking into Apple and offering to sell them Microsoft source code.
It's a perfect analogy. And the English government was furious. You have to remember, maps weren't just drawings back then. They were state secrets. Navigational data was classified intel. For Hudson to take his English knowledge and offer it to the Dutch, today he'd be arrested at the airport for corporate espionage.
So why do it? Was he desperate for money, or is he just that obsessed with the ice?
I think it's the obsession. The English had cut him off. They said, no more. Hudson was an addict, and the VOC was the only dealer left in town who would give him a ship.
So he pitches them.
He met with Dutch cartographers like Petrus Plancius and Jodocus Hondius. These were the smartest guys in the room. They looked at his maps, they debated the routes, and despite the political risks, they hired him.
The Dutch gave him the Have-Men, or the Half Moon.
Yes. A small ship, decent crew, mixed Dutch and English sailors, and they gave him very specific orders.
Which were?
Go back to the northeast, try the Russia route again,
Right.
And under no circumstances were you to go west, do not go west.
But he doesn't do that, does he?
He starts to. He sails toward Novaya Zemlya again, but the crew starts to rebel. They've heard the stories of the freezing cold. They see the ice. They basically say, we are not doing this.
A mini mutiny.
Exactly. And this is where Hudson makes a pivotal, history-changing decision. Instead of forcing them on or turning back to Amsterdam, which would be the responsible thing to do,
He improvises.
he pulls out a map. He had received some intel from his friend, Captain John Smith.
The John Smith of Jamestown and Pocahontas fame.
The very same.
Small world.
Very small world. Smith had sent Hudson a letter and some maps suggesting there was a passage through the North American continent, somewhere north of Virginia, a sea of the West.
So Hudson looks at his freezing crew and says, "Hey, how would you guys like to go to America instead?"
Precisely. He violates his contract with the Dutch, turns the ship 180 degrees, and sails across the Atlantic to the New World. This is the rogue voyage.
It's completely rogue, and it changes history. He sails down the coast of North America. He checks out Maine, Cape Cod, the Chesapeake Bay, Delaware Bay.
He's looking for an opening, a big one, something large enough to be a passage to the Pacific.
And in September 1609, he finds it.
He finds a big one. He enters New York Harbor. He sees this massive river flowing from the north. The water is deep. The land is lush. He thinks, this is it. This is the way to China.
Which is funny to think about now. Sailing past Manhattan thinking, next stop, Beijing.
He sails up the river, what we now call the Hudson River, for about 150 miles. He gets all the way near modern-day Albany.
And the water starts to get shallow.
It gets shallow. It becomes fresh water. He realizes it's a river, not a strait. It's a dead end.
But even though it was a dead end for the passage, the interactions he had there were significant, right?
Yeah.
And we need to talk about the indigenous contact because it sets the tone for everything that follows in New York history.
Hugely significant. He traded with the Lenape and the Mohican peoples. They traded furs, beaver pelts for knives and beads. But it wasn't all friendly.
No.
We have the journal of Robert Jewett. Remember that name? Robert Jewett, who was an officer on the ship.
Is Jewett the villain of this story? He keeps popping up.
He is certainly an antagonist. Jewett was a cynic, and he was suspicious. His journal records a specific incident where they invited indigenous leaders on board and gave them alcohol.
A test.
A test to see how they would handle it, or perhaps to make them malleable for trade. Jewett records getting them drunk to the point of unconsciousness. It was manipulative.
And there was violence.
There was. Jewett records kidnappings, skirmishes, killing indigenous people who approached the ship too closely. It set a very tense, violent precedent for the region. This wasn't a peaceful cultural exchange. It was a collision.
So Hudson realizes this isn't the path to China. He turns around. But he doesn't go back to the Netherlands, right?
No. On his return leg, he lands in Dartmouth, England.
Why?
Maybe he was low on supplies, or maybe he was tired of the Dutch crew. We're not sure. But as soon as he lands, the English authorities seize him.
Because he was sailing for the rival.
Exactly. They detain him. They forbid him from leaving the country to serve a foreign power again. The Half Moon eventually goes back to the Dutch, and crucially, the Dutch use Hudson's voyage to claim that entire region.
Wow.
That's how we get New Netherland and New Amsterdam, which eventually becomes New York. Hudson accidentally founded the Dutch Empire in America while trying to find China.
Talk about failing upwards.
Whoa.
So he's grounded in England, but he's not done. He has one more voyage in him.
The fatal ambition. It's 1610. Hudson is back under the English flag. The map has changed. He now knows where the passage isn't, so he wants to check where it might be.
And he finds new backers.
He convinces a new group of investors, the Company of Gentlemen Adventurers, which included heavy hitters like Sir Dudley Digges and Sir Thomas Smythe, to fund one last try.
This time he's going for the Northwest Passage again.
Yes. They give him the ship Discovery, and he assembles a crew of 23 men.
Let's look at this crew list, because this is where the drama really begins. We have his son, John.
Still with him.
We have Robert Jewett, the guy who wrote the journal on the last trip.
Jewett is back, which is surprising given that he and Hudson had clashed before. Jewett was an experienced seaman, but he was cynical, older, and had a mean streak.
And then there's a young man named Henry Green.
Yes, Henry Green.
Who was Henry Green?
Green is a fascinating character. He wasn't a sailor. He was a young man from a good family, likely with powerful connections, who had fallen into bad ways.
What kind of bad ways?
Gambling, drinking, dissolute living. His family had cut him off. Hudson sort of took him under his wing as a protege. He brought him on board not for his skills, but almost as a reclamation project.
A charity case.
You could see it that way. Hudson trusted him. He even let Greene live in his house in London before the voyage.
That sounds like a mistake. Bringing a volatile, entitled amateur on a polar expedition.
It was a fatal mistake. Hudson was trying to be a mentor, but he misjudged Greene's character entirely.
So the Discovery set sail. They head northwest. They pass Iceland, pass Greenland, and they reach the furious Overfall.
That's the name for the Hudson Strait. And it's a good name. It's a terrifying stretch of water. Imagine a narrow channel where the Atlantic Ocean meets the Arctic tides.
The currents must be insane.
The water level can shift 40 feet. Huge ice flows are crashing together like tectonic plates. It's the gateway to the Canadian Arctic. Most explorers would turn back. Hudson pushes through.
Or when they pop out the other side.
They enter a massive body of water, Hudson Bay. It's huge. It's the second largest bay in the world. To Hudson, looking at the horizon, it looks like an ocean. He is convinced 100% that he has done it.
He thinks he's found the Pacific.
He thinks he's found the Pacific Ocean. He thinks he's sailing toward Japan.
So he turns south.
He sails south, exploring the eastern coast of the bay. He's looking for the exit to the warm southern seas. But as the weeks turn into months, the water doesn't get warmer. The land closes in.
And he gets funneled into a smaller bay.
He ends up in James Bay, which is a dead-end pocket at the very bottom of Hudson Bay.
And then the calendar turns. It's November.
And in the Canadian Arctic, November means you are trapped. The ice forms around the ship. The Discovery is frozen in.
They are the first Europeans to ever winter in the Canadian Arctic. They are not prepared for this, are they?
Not even close. They didn't bring enough food for a wintering. They didn't have the proper clothing. They were wearing wool, not fur. The temperature drops to minus 45 degrees Celsius.
Describe the conditions on that ship.
It's a wooden box trapped in ice. Inside, the walls are coated in frost from their own breath. It smells of unwashed bodies, mold, and fear.
And then the sickness starts.
Scurvy.
We hear about scurvy a lot, but what does it actually do to a person?
It's a complete breakdown of the body's connective tissue. Your gums rot and turn black. Your teeth fall out. Old wound scars you got as a child break open and start bleeding again.
Horrific.
Your joints swell so much you can't walk. And it creates a profound lethargy and depression. So you have a crew that is freezing, starving, in constant pain, and mentally deteriorating.
And the social breakdown.
This is where Hudson's leadership completely collapses. As the food supplies dwindle, they were down to eating moss and scavenging for birds. Accusations start flying.
What kind of accusations?
Hudson is accused of hoarding food for his favorites, specifically for his son John, and maybe Henry Greene initially. He has a secret scuttle, a hidden hatch in his cabin where men suspect he's hiding bread and cheese.
That is poison for crew morale. If you think the captain is eating while you starve, loyalty evaporates.
Exactly. And Hudson makes erratic decisions. He demotes Jewett and promotes another man. He gets into public, shouting fights. At one point, he threatens to build a house on the shore, implying that he doesn't know when or if they will ever leave.
So he's not offering any hope.
He essentially tells them, I'm the master, you do what I say, but he projects only uncertainty and paranoia. He lost the room.
So they survive the winter. Barely. Spring comes. The ice starts to break up. It's June 1611.
This is the moment of truth. The ship is free. The crew, led by Jewett and Greene, just want to go home. They are starving. They are sick. They are done.
And
Hudson says no. He still believes the passage is just around the corner. He wants to continue the search. He orders the ship to head west, not east, toward England.
And that's the breaking point.
That is it. The conspiracy forms quickly. Henry Greene, the young man Hudson had saved, the protege teams up with Robert Jewett, the disgruntled older mate. They decide that Hudson has to go.
I want to play devil's advocate for the mutineers for a second. Because it's easy to paint Henry Greene and Robert Jewett as cartoon villains.
It is.
But put us on that ship. It's June. We've been eating moss and rot for 7 months. We're sick.
And we have maybe 2 weeks of food left in the hold.
And the captain says, go west. He wants to explore more. If I'm Henry Greene, I'm looking at the map. If we go west, 100% of us die.
Right.
If we go east immediately, maybe 50% of us die.
That's exactly the calculation. The term they used was triage, effectively. They categorized the crew. You had the workers, the men strong enough to pull the ropes and sail the ship home, and you had the sick mouths, men so crippled by scurvy they couldn't stand up.
It's the trolley problem on a boat. Do you kill the few to save the many, or do you all die together out of loyalty?
And Greene decided he wasn't dying for Hudson's dream. The brutality is that they didn't just kill Hudson, they lumped him in with the sick mouths. They decided his leadership was a disability.
So take us to the morning of June 22nd or 23rd, 1611. What happens?
It happens fast. At dawn, Hudson comes out of his cabin. He is immediately seized by the mutineers. They bind his arms behind his back.
No debate.
There's no trial, no long debate. They just grab him.
And they have the shallop ready.
The shallop is a small, open boat, basically a large rowboat with a small sail. They lower it into the freezing water.
Who goes into the boat?
Henry Hudson, obviously. His son, John Hudson, who was probably around 19 years old at this point.
Yeah.
And 7 other crew members.
Who are the others? Were they all Hudson loyalists?
Not necessarily. Most of them were simply the sickest men on board, men dying of scurvy who couldn't stand. But there was one man, Philip Staff, the ship's carpenter.
What about him?
He wasn't sick. He chose to go. He reportedly told the mutineers that he would rather sink with the master than live with them. He took his carpenter's chest and got in the boat.
That is an incredible act of loyalty, or perhaps defiance.
It really is. So you have 9 men in this small open boat. The mutineers give them a gun, some powder, an iron pot, and a tiny amount of meal.
Not enough to survive.
Yeah.
A death sentence.
It was a death sentence.
And then the Discovery sails away.
There's a heartbreaking detail in the accounts the shallop tries to keep up. The men in the rowboat start rowing after the big ship.
Oh, no.
For a while, the Discovery is moving slow, dragging through the ice. It looks like maybe they won't really leave them. Maybe it's just a scare tactic.
Again.
Then the mutineers on the Discovery unfurl the mainsail. The wind catches it. The ship picks up speed, and they leave the shallop behind. Hudson and his son become a speck on the horizon, and then they are gone.
Chilling. Just absolutely chilling. But the mutineers don't exactly get a happily ever after, do they?
No, karma comes for them pretty quickly. They sail north to a place called Digges Island to hunt for birds' mirrors, to restock their food. While they are on shore, they are attacked by Inuit.
Who gets killed?
Henry Green, the ringleader, is shot with arrows and dies a slow, agonizing death on the ship. Several others are killed. It's almost instantaneous justice.
And Robert Jewett, the other ringleader.
Jewett survives the attack, but the return voyage is a nightmare. They run out of food. They are eating candles, huge amounts of animal bones fried in tallow. Jewett dies of starvation just within sight of the Irish coast.
So the 2 main architects of the mutiny never made it home.
Correct. Only 8 of the original 23-man crew make it back to London.
And when they get there, mutiny's a hanging offense. They killed their captain. What happened to them?
They were arrested. There was an inquiry, but, and this is the cynicism of the age, they weren't hanged. They were acquitted.
Why? That makes no sense.
Because they had the maps. They had the navigational data from the voyage. The investors, the gentlemen adventurers, thought that the information these men possessed about the Northwest Passage was too valuable to lose.
So they got away with it.
They essentially got away with murder because they were useful. It was a cover-up for the sake of future profits.
That is, well, it fits the corporate theme we started with. Profit over justice.
Precisely.
So the Discovery returns. But Henry Hudson is left in the bay. This brings us to the mystery. What happened to him?
This is the question that has haunted historians for 400 years. The most likely and most tragic scenario is that they died of exposure and starvation within a few weeks.
That's the logical answer.
It was open water, they were weak, they had almost no supplies, the Arctic is unforgiving.
But there are other theories. We have to talk about the Hudson Stone. This is the kind of stuff I love.
The Hudson Stone. In 1959, a construction worker near the Ottawa River, which is a long way south of James Bay, found a large stone with the inscription HH 1612 captive.
H for Henry Hudson. Captive implies he was taken prisoner.
That's the theory. It suggests that Hudson and maybe his son survived, made it to shore, and were captured by indigenous people, possibly the Algonquin, and taken south along the trade routes.
Is the stone real?
It's controversial. Many historians think it's a hoax or a misinterpretation. The lettering style is debated, but it aligns with another piece of evidence.
What's that?
Samuel de Champlain, the French explorer, was in the area in 1613. He recorded rumors from the indigenous people about an English boy who had been enslaved or adopted by a tribe in the north.
Could that have been John Hudson?
It is possible. There are also Cree legends of a man with a red beard, Firebeard, who came from the sea and lived among them. It's romantic to think they survived and integrated, but we have no physical proof.
There was also a discovery on Danby Island, right? Some physical evidence?
Yes, much later. In the 1630s and then the 1660s, other explorers found ruins on Danby Island. Stakes driven into the ground, chips from steel blades, which the indigenous people didn't use at the time.
What does that suggest?
It suggests that someone built a shelter there. It could have been Hudson's carpenter, Philip's staff, trying to build a winter home.
But ultimately, they vanished.
They vanished. The bay became their grave.
It's a heavy story, but we have to look at the legacy. Hudson failed to find the passage to China in all 4 attempts. But what did he actually achieve?
He failed in his specific goals, but he succeeded in changing the map of the world.
How so?
Well, he founded the British whaling industry. He laid the groundwork for the Dutch settlement of New York, which shaped the history of the United States. And he opened the door to the Canadian interior for the Hudson's Bay Company, which dominated the fur trade for centuries.
So his failures had massive consequences.
Unintended, but massive, and scientifically. His logbooks were incredibly detailed. We mentioned the mermaid, but he also recorded data on the magnetic field, the declination of the compass.
And that's important.
It's vital. Modern scientists actually use Hudson's data from the 1600s to model the historic movements of the Earth's core. His observations are still useful today.
That is amazing, that his scribbles from a freezing cabin are helping us understand the planet's core 400 years later.
It is. He was a flawed man. He was a difficult leader. He was an absent father in some ways, dragging his son into danger. But he was a brilliant navigator.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, how should we remember Henry Hudson?
I see him as the ultimate corporate entrepreneur of the age of discovery. He was driven, he was willing to take massive risks with other people's money and lives, and he refused to take no for an answer. He pushed the map to the edge of the known world.
And paid the ultimate price for it.
Exactly.
I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. We picture that shallop drifting away, the sails of the Discovery disappearing over the horizon. We assume Hudson died a lonely, freezing death. But consider this. Hudson was a survivor. He had navigated the worst oceans on Earth. Is it possible, just possible, that the Firebeard legends are true? That somewhere in the oral histories of the North, passed down through generations of Cree or Inuit storytellers, there's a record of what really happened to the man who gave his name to the bay. Maybe the history books are empty, but the memory of the land isn't.
That is a fascinating thought to end on.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.